Hello and welcome to another episode of SoFly. It is February 1st. This show is coming out the 15th, but we actually have a new show out today, which is crazy, with Matt. So, I don't know. The schedule is all messed up because we're doing some, pre-records, which is cool. Getting a little more, a little ahead of things. But back recording another show. Super excited today to be chatting about some place that we really enjoy and haven't fished this spot yet, but really enjoy the state. But before we get into that, of course, my name is Mitch. We've got Aldo.
Hello, everybody.
And Yilma can't join us today because Yilma has a migraine, which is, feel better, Yilma. We're rooting for you. There's a thing that happens to Yilma. I don't know, soccer injury or something. I can't remember what it was, but it's no good. But
that big brain of his pushing up against.
Yeah, feel better, Yilma. But super excited today to be chatting about something very fishy and fun. In 2014, author and angler Robert McConnell and his wife Ellen moved from their home in rural Pennsylvania to the bustling city of Houston, Texas. Robert traded chasing wild brook trout on creeks to going after fish Texas had to offer, which is, of course, a multitude of warm water fish species that live in the surrounding waterways of Houston. He found he enjoyed exploring more remote waterways, including those found in the piney woods of East Texas. He eventually went on to write the second book in a local angler series about Texas waters. Of course, we had the first book Aaron Reed on. This is the second book. This one's called Fly Fishing Houston and Southern Texas. The book comes out February 7th and will be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and especially fly shops in Texas. But today, Robert is on SoFly. Robert, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super stoked to chat. It's... before we started recording, we were talking about how chilly it is up here in Canada. So just thinking about warmer, fishing and warmer weather is getting me jazzed.
Yeah, the reason I asked you about it though is because it's kind of cold down here. Cold from what we're generally used to. But yeah, I was asking because I was wondering if you guys were just getting blasted by cold weather up there. But
now, is it the kind of cold that is worrying? Kind of like a couple of years ago. Remember when it snowed in Texas, and that was like, that was craziness.
Yeah, it's not supposed to get that bad.
No, okay,
but,
that's good.
I think that's still in the back of everybody's mind.
Yeah,
I think they did get freezing rain up in Dallas and
Jeez.
and north of Austin, so
wow,
it's not good.
No.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking, Toronto is pretty mild compared to the rest of the country, but right now it's looking a lot like Canada outside for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, mild to you guys though is still like winter.
Yeah.
Right.
Wasteland,
Yeah.
everybody else.
I was out there in a t-shirt today recycling some boxes and I had my big boots on. I felt like a crazy person. It's like minus 14 today and I'm just walking around in a t-shirt.
That's because you weren't wearing pants.
Exactly.
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 I would say I was just kind of have this thought off the top of my head. I think we've had a lot of Americans on the show, which is awesome. But I think disproportionately we've had more Texans on than anybody.
No way.
I think you're right.
I think because we've had our buddies Matt and Joe, and we've been there a couple times. We've had Alvin Dido on the show, Aaron Reed, and now yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, SoFly loves Texas, is I guess what we're trying to say.
I think it's cool that there's such a huge fly fishing community there. What is the community like in Houston? Because we haven't fished there, but is it big?
Yeah, it's I wouldn't say it's like it's as big as Austin or as big as the communities around, the Guadalupe. Like the Guadalupe River gets so much attention, just because it's the only trout fishery in Texas. So I wouldn't say it's that big, but I was surprised, coming from Pennsylvania, where there is a community of trout anglers and fly fishermen, to then coming down to Texas and thinking that it was going to be, I was going to have no opportunities for fly fishing, and then seeing that there's just fly fishing all around me pretty much in any little ditch or anything.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned it, this was a question I wanted to ask a little bit later, but were you nervous when you first moved? Like, were you nervous leaving? Because I fish Pennsylvania and it's amazing. And were you nervous leaving those trout waters to fish warm water?
Yeah, I was. I think more so just from the lifestyle change. I grew up in a small town, and before we moved down here, we were living in a small town too. And so I think just knowing that we were going to move down to the fourth largest city in the country in the United States was something that, I was a little apprehensive about, and probably the reason why we didn't make the move sooner. I just kept kind of pushing it down the road. I work in the oil and gas industry, and so Houston's like the energy capital of the world.
Right.
So
right, of course.
It seems like eventually people do their tour down in Houston. I was just kind of like pushing it off, and then we ended up coming down here, and I don't know. It's been great. Like, we've really enjoyed our time in Houston.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we were kind of treating it as like we'll give it a 2-year thing, or we'll give it a 3-year thing. And if we don't work together, if we don't jive down in the big city, we'll turn around and come back. I mean, our family's from Pennsylvania, so that wouldn't have been a problem, but
so you're
I don't know.
Like born and raised in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Okay,
So when you say that, that you've had more Texans on the show, I can't actually claim that I'm a Texan because
right.
That's cool.
Yeah,
or at least people that live in Texas.
Well, we've only had a couple Pennsylvanians on the show, so Tim Camisa, and now yourself.
Oh,
so
nice. Yeah.
Why don't we kind of just start there then? Like, how did you get into fly fishing? I mean, Pennsylvania, it's like fly fishing, the place to fly fish. So maybe it's kind of an obvious question. But.
Well, I got started late because I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania, and that's like the coal country part of the state.
Okay.
So there wasn't a lot of fishing opportunities when I was growing up. Like the creek that was behind our house, that would be the creek that we'd always go play in and stuff. My sister and I, that creek was orange. We'd still play in it, but it was just orange from AMD.
Just polluted.
Yeah, abandoned mine drainage. Just all the sulfur.
No way.
Yeah. And now it's great. I mean, they've really worked on that creek, and actually, I think it was probably 4 years ago now. Well, 3 years ago, I went back up there and brought my 2-weight just in the off chance that I would be able to catch fish out of this, what used to be an Orange Creek. And I was catching like bluegill and green sunfish and
cool.
And even caught like a little smallmouth out of this once polluted creek. So
it's rebounding.
That's a cool story.
Rebounding. Yeah. It's coming back.
Aside.
So it's super exciting. And a lot of creeks in PA are coming back. There's another really gorgeous creek called the Blacklick Creek that was, within 15 minutes from my house, and that is orange still, but they're building like an active treatment plant to actively pool the I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but
contaminants and whatnot.
Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine.
Find it interesting.
That's what podcasting's about,
Yeah, they drilled a hole on the surface, and they drilled down into the mine chamber, which is flooded. And so when the mine chambers, prior to 1979 or whatever, coal companies could just mine, and then they could just pack up and leave, just cave in the front of the mine and just be like, all right, that's it.
See you later.
Yeah. And so there was like a Mine Reclamation Act that went in. I don't remember the exact date, but it was like 1980s or something like that. And so after that, they actually had to reclaim the mines and return everything back to a more natural state before they had abandoned the area.
Right.
So there's all these mines like prior to the 1980s, which are just left abandoned. There's something like 5,000 of them.
What?
And,
That's crazy.
Tons. And so there's so this was like a abandoned mine cavity that it just fills up with water over time, and then just fills up, and then it eventually just leaks out onto the surface. And so that's what was happening, and like all these little rivulets and stuff like that were just dumping all this AMD into the Blacklick Creek. And so what they did is they drilled down into the mine itself, and they pump that water straight up out of the mine, and they get it, they treat it on the surface, and then they put it right into the Blacklick Creek. And what's cool about that is, well, the idea, and they've done it on the West Branch of the Susquehanna and stuff like that, but the idea was that this cold water now gets dumped right into the Blacklick, and it's fresh cold water. Yeah. And so you actually start getting a cold water fishery right there.
Huh.
Right.
So the idea is now that
it's actually giving back. It's like turning it into something better.
Yeah, and it's like turning it into a smallmouth fishery or a trout fishery. Yeah.
Wow. That's cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, dang, it's great that stuff like that's happening because it's like, like we've just like totally torqued, like the Earth, and then it's like now we're trying to fix it, and it's working in some cases, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's like definitely like a positive story that
that's great.
Something to really focus on sometimes whenever you're like, oh man, this is happening.
Yeah,
oh
totally.
no, we're all doomed.
There are good things happening too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a good thing to remember. Good point.
Yeah. So I'm just excited for that to go in, so that whenever I go back to visit my parents, give it a couple years, and maybe we'll be fishing smallies and
imagine 10, 20 years from now, it'll be great. Black Lick Creek is what it's called, you said?
Black
Lick Creek. What a cool name.
Yeah, Black Lick's one word, and then there's like the town of Black Lick, which is 2 words. So,
right.
But yeah,
it's like Crick, like Crick is just a cool word. I just like that.
Oh yeah,
I call him Creek Crick,
I think it is actually, it is actually spelled creek. It just Black
Crick's
Lick
cooler,
Creek.
man. I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I totally dig that. No, that's a good story. That's like, that's positive. That's good. So so you learned to fly fish in Pennsylvania. You kind of grew up playing in Orange Rivers, and then
yeah. So sorry to get back to the main topic at hand. I went to college for geology, and then went up to northern Pennsylvania, and I was working for a gas company up there, and we just had like this really cool, smallmouth fishery in the backyard, and that's why I was conventional angling. I ran into a bunch of I got a good group of buddies up there that they all like duck hunting and deer hunting and all this, and so we all got kayaks, and we would float the local rivers in the summertime, fishing smallies and pike and stuff like that. And then it was like a camping trip. We were on a camping trip, and I remember seeing the brook trout restoration signs on all these hemlock trees that were along the creek, and it was artificial lures only, brook trout restoration area, catch and release. And I had I think it was like a tiny little Shakespeare spinning rod, something like that. And I just had like a rooster tail spinner. And you see restoration, this and that, signs everywhere, and you just never expect to actually catch anything. And I remember throwing the rooster tail in like this riffle and just watching it bounce down, and this brook trout that was 5 inches or whatever came out from this root wad and just ate the rooster tail. And it just floored me. I couldn't believe it. And then, I went home after the camping trip and was like researching online about brook trout and native brook trout and how they're doing in Pennsylvania and if they're coming back. And then that kind of just led me down the road of, people fly fish for this. That seems like a lot of fun. And then, I just got totally ate up by blue lining for native brookies, and then did that for a solid summer where that's just all I wanted to do was just blue line for brookies. And then through that, I got introduced to other guys that did the brown trout thing down in State College area and like on the limestone creeks down there, and got connected with them. And then, I just started fishing more and more for trout and just fly fishing in general.
So your first fish was a trout, like a brook trout?
On the fly rod? Yeah, it was.
Right on.
Pretty cool. Yeah, it's pretty good first fish.
Yeah.
I
guess. Yeah, it was a native too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right on.
That's really cool.
Yeah, a couple years ago, I got to go fish State College for the first time, and I was like, or that area.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful area. Just all those limestone creeks down in there.
Yeah, that's something we don't have up here. So and it's so close relative. We
gotta go. We gotta go this year.
Like it's closer for us to go to State College than most of the places we fish in Northern Ontario, and we fish Northern Ontario a lot. So for us, it's like about maybe 4-hour drive.
It's not bad at all. Let's go.
Really? You can make a weekend out of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, when you guys come down, do you go through?
I cross it. We cross it like around Buffalo.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure. You probably drive right down through the area that I was working in and fishing in, like
when you said northern Pennsylvania, I'm like, that's where we drive through.
Yeah, it was Warren. I lived in the town of Warren, which is south of Buffalo by 2 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. We kind of just follow that. Yeah, you're right. Like we follow that path. I think I took what is it, I-80?
Yeah, probably for part
I-86 or something like that for part of it, and then just kept going down south, and then you get to State College. It's kind of funny that such a massive college, Penn State, of course, is amongst all this fly fishing.
Yeah, I know, right?
I did not go to college in a fly fishy place.
Well, don't they have a fly fishing course you can take too?
Like, yeah, they do. Or at least they did. I know
they did. I remember at one point.
Yeah, right, Joe Humphreys was teaching it, I think.
That's so sick.
Man, that
why didn't we go to that school?
Yeah.
What the heck were we doing?
Yeah. Well, also, it's probably a good thing because I would have failed out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's cool, man. Okay, so does your wife fly fish?
She says that in general she likes fishing okay.
Yeah, just kind of like,
yeah.
She goes for you kind of thing.
Yeah, and it would be, and when I ask her if she would be interested in fly fishing, she says, why would I take something that I think is just okay and then make it harder?
Right. So. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, well, so you guys decided to make the plunge and move down to Houston because of work. What were your first impressions of going from a little city to the big city, and what was that like?
Yeah, because for context for a Canadian view, Houston's actually pretty similar to Toronto in population size.
Yeah,
so, in fact, it's almost identical. I was reading up on it today, and the Greater Toronto area, and I guess the Greater Houston area, and all the suburbs are pretty much the same. Toronto's just shy of 3 million, and we're just shy of 7 million with all of our suburbs. So.
Oh yeah, that's pretty much spot on with Houston. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's a big place, it's not a small city.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just kind of growing and absorbing everything around it.
Mm.
Yeah.
It was quite the change. Just, I don't know, getting down here, even to this day, you're driving around, it's like white knuckling in traffic and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot of changes like that just we had to get used to. But on the fishing side of things, I didn't know what to expect, really. I was kind of thinking, okay, I'm going to be fishing, once, twice a year, whenever I have vacation, whenever I do trips, things like that. And that completely changed when we came down here. And I talk a little bit about it in the book. Was the eye-opening moment was I was pedaling my bike along a bike path, and I saw cormorants, in this ditch that were right next to the bike path, and they were diving under and just pulling green sunfish up out of this ditch, like messes of them. And this ditch was, 3 feet wide and 3 feet deep, something like that. It wasn't big at all. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't believe how many green sunfish these cormorants are pulling out. And so I just watched them, and they flew away. And I noticed that there was a culvert that protruded into this ditch, and I was thinking, well, if I was the green sunfish that escaped that, I would be hiding in that culvert. So then the next day I came back with my 3-weight, actually my brook trout rod, and I just pitched like a royal wolf or whatever my brookie fly was that I had, and I just pitched it in there, and a green sunfish came out and ate it. And then I messed around in that ditch, catching more green sunfish, and then that kind of that whole thing just kind of opened my eyes. And then I started, the more I researched, the more I found out that this wasn't a new thing. There are guys that have been fishing down here for a long time and fly fishing, like Mark Marmon. He's a guy that's been guiding fishing trips for carp since the 1980s.
Yeah.
Other guys
since the 80s.
Yeah, since 1980s, yeah. Because he said that he was Europeans, were fishing for carp on conventional tackle, and they were all into it. But he was a fly angler that would go down to the Texas coast all the time. Right. And then he went and fished one of the local ditches, a cement line ditch, and started toying with these carp that were in this ditch. And then he's just started putting two and two together. Like, okay, a lot of Europeans come over to Houston for business, and then if they like fishing for carp and I like fly fishing for carp, well, then maybe they would want to try and fly fish for carp with me. And so he was walking the ditches as a guide, in the 1980s with clients. So, and there's Danny Scarborough's a guy that still guides down here for carp and bowfin and bass. He does all kinds of guiding down here. So there was this whole community of fly anglers that because I wasn't looking and I didn't have my eyes open, I had my blinders on, thinking, "Oh, woe is me! Yeah, I'm gonna be, I'm gonna be
more trout."
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Yeah, exactly. And then just all of a sudden, there's this huge fishery, and it's, not saying anything bad about my beloved brook trout, but these creeks that we're fishing, I'm not just it's not just a monoculture. It's not just
Yeah.
brook trout, or it's in this case it's it wouldn't,
shots
it's
of
not,
other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just long ears. It's like, oh, okay, long ears, spotted bass, largemouth bass, warmouth. I mean, species of panfish that I'd never caught before in my life until moving down here, and now I'm catching all kinds of crazy stuff.
So what are the opportunities? Because I mean, it's funny because you say you took 3-weight, took like a trout, like a royal wolf trout, dry fly, and basically fished like you would brook trout, and you got into a sunfish. Like, what are the fish that you're chasing down there, and like the species, and what are the tactics? Are they all kind of like fish and trout?
Yeah,
or is it just more.
Yeah. There's that's a good question, because it's kind of like every species has a different tactic, but also every scenario has a different tactic too. And like you might be fishing for carp in like up on Lake Conroe or in one of the rivers, and you fish for them kind of, it's a bit different than how you'd fish for the ones that are on the concrete flats, what we call the concrete flats, down in like basically downtown Houston kind of.
And it's just carp concrete flats. You just go out.
Yeah. So that's
cool.
I mean, well, we can talk about that. Like that's one of the species that gets a lot of attention down here. It's like an urban fishery basically, and it's grass carp. And so kind of what the fishery is like is it's a cement lined ditch that has an apron. It has a concrete apron along the sides that the water flows over. Maybe, I don't know.
There's a picture if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a picture. And like in that concrete apron's maybe 2 feet deep, something like that, 1 foot in some places.
Yeah.
And so, and then in the middle of the channel, there's a real deep channel, so probably 4 feet deep, something like that. And it's cement lined all the way. And so what will happen is you'll get like an algae growth up on that apron, and there'll be cracks and things like that up on the apron, and gravel will roll in there, and then you get bugs in there. And so what these grass carp will do is they'll be hanging out in that real deep channel, and then they'll move up onto this shallower concrete apron, or what we call the concrete flats, and then they'll kind of fin in the current up on that flat, and they'll be just picking off like algae and stuff that's floating downstream, or picking off bugs that get kicked up. And you can when the opportunity arises and you can see that they're feeding on or near the surface, you can pitch a dry fly in there and catch them on a dry fly.
What? That's crazy. Carp on a dry fly.
Yeah.
See, because I know the question sounded like, do you use different tactics for different fish? It's like, well, no shit. If you catch bass, you're not going to fish it like you would a dry fly trout. It's like, but like you're saying, like you go out and fish carp with dry flies. Like that's crazy. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, it's a wild fishery. Like Danny Scarborough caught, I think it was a 16-pound carp. It was, pushing 30, if not, I think it was 32 inches, and he caught that on a dry.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's crazy.
Yeah. And like, there's a guy who writes for Hatch magazine, and he's written a couple books. His name's Chris Hunt. He was down here fishing, and I took him to the concrete flats, and he like brought out his fly box, and it's like a size 12, caddis or something like that. I forget what it was, and he was like, "Think this will work?" And he pitched that in there, and I think the first one he hooked. Oh no! It floated by, and like the carp came up, and it just ate so slow. It just came up and just did. It's like, just they're so lazy. They're just used to getting everything that they eat in that water, and he just ate it so slowly that Chris was like so jazzed up that he just pulled the fly right out of his mouth, and then he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that carp just came up and ate that like a trout." And then he tried again, and of course he hooked it the next time, or another carp. But I mean, so there's opportunities like that that's within like the 610 loop, what people consider real metropolitan areas, skyscrapers and stuff in the background. And then fish for carp there. There's catfish in there, tilapia in there, and then you can move outside of the city. And then that's kind of when you get into what I refer to in the book as the piney woods. So when you go north of the city by about only an hour, it's something like 50, 60 miles north of the city, that's when you can fish for spotted bass, largemouth bass, 6 different species of panfish. That you can fish for all those. And then I do address in the book 2 lakes that are in the area. So Lake Conroe is one of them, and Sheldon Lake's another one. And that's TPWD, Texas Parks and Wildlife. They put Florida largemouth in both of those lakes,
cool.
so they get big. And then
big fish.
Both of those lakes have populations of bowfin. Lake Conroe has a bunch of different species in it as well. Freshwater drum, gar, spotted gar, big red ear sunfish, bluegill. Yeah. So there's all kinds of fish species.
Is there any pike or muskie or anything like that?
No, there's no pike or muskie, but actually it's funny you mentioned that because this year was the first year that I caught another species in the Essex genus, and that was a redfin pickerel.
Cool.
Yeah, it's redfin. From what I've been researching, some people call it a redfin, and then some people call it a grass. The redfin is like a sub. They tried to break the redfin out as its own species from the grass pickerel.
It looks like a muskie
with red fins.
But they're small. Yeah. They're like super small.
Really tiny. I thought those were just babies, but like those are like that's how big they are.
Yeah, like that's how like the one I caught I think was
weird,
7 inches, something like that.
That is so cool.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
I've never heard of this fish.
No.
Yeah, so
cool.
I caught one this year. That's the first one I ever caught, and it was like Lake Conroe. We were up messing around fishing some of the back bays, kind of wading in the water, and we were actually trying to see if the white bass were starting to run up in the tributaries. And I just pitched my fly back in one of these tributaries, and that thing came out and ate it.
You imagine being a fish and being born in the Esox family, and it's like, oh my god, like the most predatory, like badass, huge fish, and you're like, oh no, I'm a redfin pickerel, and you're like swimming through the water,
Yeah.
Could be a 45-inch muskie,
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're going after dragonfly larvae when you could
exactly.
bass.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, watching your tail for sunfish. Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Like, it sounds like a really diverse fishery, and then of course you also have alligator gar too.
Yep.
Well.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Alligator gar.
Those are wild.
I've landed specifically a single alligator gar.
Cool.
But they're just, I don't know. They're sometimes they're there and sometimes they're not. I know that they can live in brackish water too. So I mean, we've toyed with them down. In the estuaries and things like that on the Texas coast. You'll just see them there sometimes, and then a month later they won't be there anymore. Or maybe they are there, they're just kind of
what a weird
doing guard
cool
things someplace
fish.
else.
Like they get huge, eh? Like Houston even gets some big ones.
Yeah. The Houston gets massive ones, especially in the Trinity, which is just east of the city. And then I mean there's a whole group of guys that fish conventional tackle with bait for them in the city. Like they're down with like downtown Houston looming in the background, and they're out there on their John boats and stuff, like catching decent sized alligator gar.
I mean, I'm just Googling it right now, and these fish are like 300 pounds.
Yeah, they can get massive. I think the Trinity River record's over 200 pounds.
What?
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
These fish are really cool looking. I mean, they kind of look like an arapaima or something.
Yeah, I could see. Yeah, I could see.
You know what I mean?
Say that. Yeah.
Wild.
You forget how close. Well, maybe you don't forget it because you live there, but like I often forget how close Houston is to the coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right there.
I mean,
it's
it did get hammered by a hurricane, not that long ago. So
yeah, it's right there. And actually, that was kind of one of the things that was what was a little bit different about this book is that so much of fly fishing in Texas and especially Houston is the coast.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
It's going down to the coast, getting on your skiff and like blasting out to the flats and fishing in some of those marshes and stuff back there.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because you've got Trinity Bay, East Bay. I'm seeing here like some big water.
Yeah, exactly. And then I mean, a lot of people drive further south, to Port O'Connor and that. I mean, that's an easy drive. But what I kind of wanted to do with this book was that I kind of just wanted to write it so that, like me, you could show up not really knowing anything and just grab a fly rod and half a dozen flies and be able to catch fish in the ditch right out in your backyard. You know, you don't need to get a skiff, or you don't need to, you know.
Yeah, there's definitely nothing accessible about a $70,000 boat, you know. So there's something to be said about.
Well, and I mean, you're fishing the ocean at that point too.
Exactly.
You know what I mean, like the flats and stuff. It's like, and that's all redfish and stuff.
Yeah,
right?
it's daunting. You know? I mean,
for sure.
Yeah,
but that's kind of what I just wanted to do with this book, was just make it so that just don't sell a 3-weight if you move down here from Pennsylvania or wherever.
There's more to Houston than, you know, going to the coast and looking for redfish.
Yeah, exactly,
that's cool.
exactly.
So obviously you had to do a lot of exploring to write the book. Did the book take you to places that you didn't know about, or I guess maybe there's a better question there, where it's like, what place surprised you the most?
Yeah,
you know, like while you're writing the book, you're like, holy, like I always heard about this river or whatever, you know.
Yeah, and definitely for me, it was the urban stuff. It was like the concrete flats, just getting down in the city, fishing that stuff. That surprised the heck out of me, because up until that point, I was always leaving the city on the weekends when I wanted to go fishing. I was driving north, you know. I was going to the lake to escape the people and escape the traffic and find the tranquility, you know, walk along the creek and not run into anybody, not see anybody. Not listening to traffic. And so when I went to explore more and understand more about the concrete flats, I was kind of like, oh man, this is going to be okay. It'll be fun, you know, to get in there and see what it's all about. But I didn't really have high hopes that I would like it. But then when I got in there, I was like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Like, I could definitely see why people would get into this, because the chances are when you catch that carp, it's going to be a double digit. You know, it's going to weigh double digits.
That was just amazing.
Yeah, and especially the ones that live in like the concrete lined ditches, they don't let a meal go by. They're voracious. So, and you fish them a little bit differently than you do when you think of like fishing a spooky common carp out on like some river or some lake somewhere, where you're kind of like putting the fly out in front of them, maybe stripping it into their feeding lane if they're feeding, something like that, maybe wiggling it a little bit to try and get their attention. These are grass carp, and a lot of times their mouth is positioned more to the front, and so they're eating stuff a lot in the water column. And like you put a fly on their face, and like Joe Mills, who's a local fly angler in Houston, and Danny Scarborough, they both taught me this, that you like put that fly almost right on their nose. I mean, if you hit them in the face and spook them, like don't worry about it, because there's plenty more fish to also go after. But also that fish that you spooked is probably going to come back like 10 minutes later and be in that same spot. And so you just like try and hit them just right out in front of their face, and they'll move to it. And a lot of times they're like a goofy fish, so a lot of times, you know, they'll miss it, or they'll like kind of give up on it. They'll go for it and then be like, it's too much work. And, you know, then you just pick up and throw it to them again.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I've yet to even hook a carp. I have tried.
Yeah.
And because it's always been that scenario where I've always spooked them. I can't say I've gone after them a lot of times, but yeah, to your point, that has been in my experience.
Yeah. I mean, and there are definitely opportunities for those super picky carp also, you know, the ones that you hear so much about, you know, like there's populations of them in Lake Conroe. I mean, they're everywhere. I've found them in the West Fork of the San Jacinto, and they're everywhere. So you'll run into them throughout, and they're a lot different than fishing the ones on the concrete flats. It's just crazy, you know. It's just it's almost like they're totally different.
Yeah, probably easy waiting. I mean, that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So, like, what made you want to write the book?
Yeah, a lot of it was to just show that Houston isn't this like there's a rap that Houston gets about how it's like the city that you go to and you work at, and you go out and eat at fancy restaurants, and like that's what you do in Houston, and then you leave.
Kind of sounds a lot like Toronto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Toronto's rap is what I'm saying.
Sure.
It's like
there's no nature, right? Like there's no wild. Yeah.
And so it was kind of like to show that. I mean, this isn't going to be some mountain town that you're going to be fishing trout in the crystalline, beautiful waterway. But
it's a different vibe.
Yeah, exactly. But you can still do the things that you want to do. You just you kind of have to like take it as it comes, and who knows, like you're going to be able to catch way more species than you ever thought you could catch had you just only been fishing for trout up in the Rockies or whatever.
For sure.
And so it was kind of that aspect of it to say like, this is here. Have fun doing it while you're here. And on top of it, you're just going to add like a ton more species to your species list.
Yeah.
If you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I mean that was I don't know, that was kind of the reason for it, just.
No, it's cool. No,
cool.
I mean, it's a big undertaking, so it's just like, wow. Like, Like you're like, I'm going to write a book about this place. Because it's special, right?
Yeah, it was a big undertaking, but I also loved it the entire time. So it just didn't really feel like work, I mean, it was work, obviously, but like, there'd be times where, I'd come home from my actual job and then, be like eat dinner or whatever, and then I'd be at my computer and 5 hours would go by and I was just like writing to, put this thing together, and I just didn't even know it. But, kind of to go back a little bit further from your original question, Mitch, in 2019 I wrote a little book that I self-published called Fly Fishing the Sam.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a similar thing to this book, where it was like right in the middle of COVID, people weren't flying anywhere. I had a bunch of little creeks that I had written down in an outdoor journal, and I just went out and started exploring them more and then writing about it. And that came at a good time to just say, we can't travel. We're not going to New Mexico. We're not going to Colorado. We have to stay here, but we can still fly fish, and we can fly fish with our trout rods. We can fly fish with our 3-weights. And so, through writing that book, then that's how I got connected with Aaron Reed, who was the editor for Fly Fishing Houston. And so, then he was a guy that kind of approached me and said, would you want to work on writing a more comprehensive Houston book? And then, for all the same reasons that I wanted to write Fly Fishing the Sam, I felt like, I'd write Fly Fishing Houston for the same reasons.
That's cool.
That's really
cool.
Man. While we're on the topic of the book, I mean, we've been talking about it for a while now, but like, what's the book about? Or like, I guess we know what the book's about, but maybe how's this information structured and organized, just for everybody listening?
Yeah. So if you saw Aaron Reed's book, Fly Fishing Austin and Central Texas, the format of my book is the exact same as Aaron's. So they took that format and they call it like the local angler series, and they're working on other books for Texas. But so what we did is Aaron came up with this. Aaron and Imbrifex Books, they kind of came up with this idea. So what they did though is they took sections of a river or a watershed, and they called them wades, and then they describe a wade in fairly great detail. I mean, they do that so that it's not like a daunting procedure to get to the water and then to figure out, like get halfway, 200 yards into the water and realize I can't wade this anymore. I need a canoe or something like that. So he was
There's an
fairly
electric plant.
Yeah, exactly. So he was like, he's fairly detailed in what to expect in the wade, but then also at the same time, it's like then you leave a lot to the imagination and plenty more to explore. So it's not like he's giving away everything, but so that's how the book is structured. It's you focus in on the wades, so a wade description, and for my book, the first half of it, after all the intro stuff, is the Piney Woods. So everything pretty much north of the city. So that includes a lot of little creeks, some medium-sized rivers, and Lake Conroe. And then we break it up. with that at the beginning, and then midway through, then we talk about like the legality of accessing streams, which is pretty important in Texas because we don't have that much public land. What's nice is that our streams and our rivers, as long as they're navigable by definition, they're open to the public. So if you can get into them, then you're pretty much you're golden.
Walk them,
yeah.
Cool.
And so we go into that in the middle, and then I go into a little bit more of like the ethics of fly fishing, proper fish handling, stuff like that. And then the second half of the book is urban stuff. So that's like when we get into the city and we start looking at concrete flats, and there's another lake that's kind of in the city limits, that's open to the public for fishing. And so I kind of focus more in on the urban stuff in the second half.
I mean, it's pretty cool how it's broken up. Like, what I like about the book is not only, for example, I'm on the page or the section on the East Fork of the San Jacinto River.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, locals call it the San Jack, but yeah.
The San Jack. Okay, cool.
Yeah. This is just easier than San Jacinto, just San Jack.
I like it because, not only does it break down the river and, some information about the river and maybe, a little bit of the history of the river and what to expect and what's around it, what's in it.
Yeah.
But you also got, a brewery recommendation at the end of it.
Oh, so
I think for anybody who lives in Houston or visiting Houston, I think what's cool is, you can kind of, plan a day around each one of these little pages, you can, now that I know that, where the East Fork is, I'm like, oh, hey, I can go fish this. I know what to do. And then, you know what? I can get a beer after it, and that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, thanks.
I think it's kind of you can really easily plan, a day trip. You can day trip. You take this whole book and just make a whole summer out of day trips.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly right, man. That was kind of the idea of it. It's like, this is here. Let's use it. Make a day trip out of it, make a weekend out of it. And a lot of those breweries, I try to put them, like the ones that I really like going to. I tried to make them dog friendly / don't care if a muddy angler shows up, kind of thing.
Waiter friendly.
Yeah, exactly.
If you even need waiters, and
only some of the time.
You probably don't.
Yeah, or now you'd need waiters. But and I kind of picked them where you'd be coming back to the city, just because I'm living in the city now, so it's like, okay, you're driving back on that main road, that main interstate. What's a good brewery to hit, and you can just hit that on your way home.
So is fishing good year round, in Houston? Then, you mentioned, it's kind of chilly now. You'd need waders, but can you fish all year? Yeah,
you can fish all year. You would need waders because now's the white bass run. So
I see.
Every year. Usually in around this time into March, April, what happens is a lot of the temperate bass in the area, which we got white bass and yellow bass. Yellow bass are native to this area, which is neat. That's another species that is pretty cool that you can catch in the Houston area. That's native to the eastern half of the state.
Mitch, I see the white glow of a Google page.
Yellow bass.
Yeah, yellow bass.
What the heck is that?
Yeah, I was going to say,
it's a little
striper. What the heck is a yellow bass?
Yeah,
it just looks like
related.
Yeah,
it's all
That's cool.
the true basses or the temperate bass.
Cool.
So right now is the beginnings of the white bass run, and so
where do they run from?
So they're usually in reservoirs or bigger bodies of water. They'll be in the Trinity too, because Trinity's a massive river, and they'll run up in the tributaries.
What?
And so that's usually when the fly anglers go after them. So
that's wicked.
Yeah,
that would be a cool thing to film. The bass run. Fuck the steelhead run. The bass run. That'd be so cool.
Actually, it's funny that you say that because coming from PA, the way Texans treat the white bass run is exactly how people treat the steelhead run in Pennsylvania. Right. I'm sure it's Toronto too. I mean, it's okay, the bass are running.
Let's go.
Let's go. Right now it's hard.
Get your gear, cold weather gear. You go down to the river.
Yeah. Right now it's hard because we've gotten so much rain in January. Just stuff is blown out. I was just emailing a guy the other day. one of the guys that's the part of the Texas Fly Fishers Club, and he's like wanting to get a group together, and he can't find any water that's not blown out right now. So
right,
so you kind of have you got to deal with that. But the white bass run is a lot of fun. I mean, they come running up in the creeks, and if you find like a hole, you can generally fish in that hole for a long time and just pull some bass out and then move on to the next hole and the same thing.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah. And what's cool about that is that you get, like I was saying, you get the white bass, but you also get the yellow bass, and then you get crappie too. You get like white crappie run up with the white bass as well.
I was going to say the yellow bass was reminding me of a crappie a bit.
Yeah.
It does kind of look like that.
They're really
white
tall
bass,
like that. Yeah.
Again, Mitch mentioned, I think before we started this call, we're both from Ottawa, which is, we mentioned that a lot on this show, that it's a warm water fishery, but just to reiterate, like,
oh, there's crappie.
No, there's black and white.
Do you know what's weird? I've never caught a crappie.
Oh man, I caught a ton.
What's with that? How have I never caught a crappie?
The Ottawa River is a huge river that runs right through the city, and there's just kind of everything in it. And well, no trout, but
no white bass. I mean, dang.
No white bass, but there are
cool.
crappie in there, and it's black and white. And,
crappie.
So that's what it was reminding me of.
Oh,
very cool.
That's cool that they're both in the river.
Bass.
Like for whatever reason, in the creeks we catch a lot of white crappie, and then in the reservoirs we catch more black crappie. I don't know if it's just because TPWD stocks the black crappie in the reservoirs more than the white, but it's interesting.
So, just while we're on the topic of native species, and you just kind of brought up stocking, what is the kind of the lay of the land when it comes to native versus stocking versus like are these rivers? Do people care? Like, do you get the sense that people care about these rivers, or do they care about them more now than ever before?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, again, I know you moved there in 2014, so that might. I'm not asking you to dig into the 1900s here, but recent history, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I guess to answer the first part of it, I mean, there's a lot of places that do get stocked. Lake Conroe, they dump Florida largemouth in Lake Conroe, so that is a non-native, but there are native largemouth to the area. So in a lot of like the creeks and things like that, they've never been stocked. Those are all fish that, I mean, in the off chance, well, not even in the East Fork. I mean, there's a chance that you could get, fish running up all the way. Like for instance, like white bass, a lot of those are stocked. They'll stock them in the reservoirs, and then whenever they get mature, they'll run up in the creeks. So yeah, there is stocking, but there's also a lot of natives, and a lot of the creeks do have natives in them. Like the East Fork of the San Jacinto, that one, to my knowledge, hasn't been stocked. The largemouth that you would catch in there would be the native species of largies. The spotted bass, which they're kind of near and dear to my heart, spotted bass are kind of like what we would consider like our native creek-dwelling blue lining fish. So like, if you go up and you're fishing, one of the small blue lining streams of the piney woods, and you've been catching small panfish all day, like a bunch of long ears, and all of a sudden your fly get hammered by something, and you think it's like this massive thing because you've been catching long ears all day, and then ends up being like a pound spotted bass, which is still a good spotted bass, but like that spotted bass is probably the tiger shark of like that whole section.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
And so like that's another super cool native fish that I've just grown to love, because it's like the style of fishing I like to do, and they're just an awesome fish, and they're a blast to catch, and they're bug eaters, so they'll hit top water, and they'll hit like a dropper that you hang off of a dry. They'll eat that, and then they'll eat a Clouser minnow too. So
amazing.
Just whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, I think there are obviously the fly anglers care a lot about the water. There's guys that I know that have called in stuff that they've seen out, especially urban stuff. Have called in to the environmental I forget the acronym for it, but Texas's environmental department like called in fish kills, called in spills, things like that.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
There's guys that do
awesome.
really care about the waterway.
And people are monitoring. Yeah,
but also like a lot of Houstonians, whether they know it or not, are directly connected with the water and do care about it in some way because our drinking water comes from Lake Houston, which is, West Fork of the San Jacinto flows into Lake Houston, East Fork of the San Jacinto flows into Lake Houston. All these other smaller creeks are there. It's all these creeks that we love fishing, all that stuff, and then they flow into the reservoir of Lake Houston, and then from there it gets pumped into our water supply. So,
so people are pretty like aware of like as a resource, but also just like of water.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They're aware of it. I mean, to an extent, I don't know exactly how aware, but they're aware of it enough that they're they know
it's important.
Yeah, exactly. And like as more and more people move to Houston, I know that the city itself is already looking at water resources in general. And they're already like kicking around ideas of doing recycled surface water for municipal use. So, now the industry, maybe you're not using Lake Houston water as much because we need that for drinking. You're going to be using the recycled water that gets collected in in the treatment plants from the runoff before it gets put back into the water.
Cool.
So they're already thinking about that. The city in general is.
Yeah, because I mean, it's a challenge of any growing city is like how do you keep your water clean?
Yeah,
and hopefully this inspires people to get on the river.
100%.
Because I mean, rivers need friends, water needs friends, because eventually it all affects us anyway.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I don't see how, I know Aaron got some flack for writing that book, but
he did.
And
I expect you too, but
the spot burn police, but I don't especially
we don't really get
that personally, especially maybe because we live in an urban area and our resources are abused a lot by not only individuals but industry, and honestly sometimes the city of Toronto itself.
Yeah.
So like. I think, we try...
Hamilton, too. Come on, Hamilton. Get your shit together.
So, I don't know. I think having angling groups and anglers inspired to, like, go on these spaces, like you said, I think sooner or later you walk these rivers enough, if you see a fish kill, or if you see some, like you said to yourself, like, even going back to your childhood, like an orange stream, it kind of is concerning when people do tend to whistleblow now, which is great.
Yeah,
and that's I don't get the spot burning thing, and Rob, we're in your corner. So if people are people are giving you shit,
well, I mean, and you're right too, Aldo, with like the fact that it's fly anglers. I mean, they're some of the most conscientious sportsmen out there, in my opinion. They're the guys that care a lot about the resource and
totally.
This book is for fly anglers. It's for people to show them, here's the resource, enjoy it. But, we're all stewards. We're all going to protect it.
Mm-hmm.
Why would we want to?
And we need to get more people to think that way, because like you can't hide a river. Like, what are you trying to hide it? Like, what do you? It's just in the world. Like, you're trying to hide it. Why don't you just teach people to like it and care for it? And like let's foster better rules and laws and stuff.
I couldn't agree more. The spot burn thing is so. It's like, was your end goal to defeat the internet? Like, I don't think that's gonna. I don't think that's gonna happen. Let's
exactly.
work
and like
on
100%.
instead.
What do you and you're worried about spot burning long ear sunfish spots? I mean, okay,
yeah,
for sure.
That's I would love to meet the guy that would be that hardcore about catching long ears.
There's probably there's probably
you'll meet them.
Like a group of them. Eventually, you'll meet them.
That's cool. No, that's good.
No, it's cool. I think it's great. I think it's really cool. I mean, like, I think people forget too. Like, I grew up and I worked in a fly shop, in my teens, and I would love reading. There was that series of magazines. Like Eastern fly fishing, Western fly fishing, and like that was all this kind of, not to this extent, of course, but like they would always pick a few rivers and communities to talk about and how to access them and where to go. That was just part of
that was what the whole magazine was based around.
Was
so
kind of spot burn in a way. It was like
in a way,
the magazine existed to burn spots, but like but not in a bad. I don't think in a bad way. It definitely inspired me. Like even just in my own head, like sitting at home dreaming about, one day maybe I'll go fish this, or I hope I get to be in that kind of scenario. I think they're inspiring.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And also to go into that more, there's a Chris Johnson who owns Living Waters Fly Shop in Round Rock. He kind of put Brushy Creek, which is a creek north of Austin. He kind of put that on the map in terms of a fly fishing creek, and since he's started promoting that creek and getting more people fly fishing it, like he's found where wastewater treatment plants weren't working properly and they were discharging sediment into the stream. Like he's identified that. He's got people from the state to work on that. With Texas Parks and Wildlife, but spearheaded by Chris Johnson, like he banned cast netting. Like basically the indiscriminate pulling out of any kind of species in Brushy Creek. You're supposed to put the game species back, but people don't. They don't know that a lot of times, or they just don't care. Right. He got cast netting banned on Brushy Creek, so now it's like, it's a angler's creek.
Right.
So and it's all fly fishermen doing that stuff.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
It's cool.
People just trying to
you bring up a
protect,
good point there. What point am I trying to make here? At least for us, our Department of our Ministry of Natural Resources here in Ontario, there isn't a lot of education. There isn't. We don't talk about it's like some people you see on the river, we run into people that are fishing for trout. Like we have seasons. I know a lot of places don't, but we can't fish for trout for basically like 2/3 of the year. Yeah, and a lot of people just straight up don't know that because there isn't anywhere telling them that. You know, it's not like when you buy your fishing license, you have to like read. They don't even tell you like, hey, make sure to follow your law. There isn't even that sentence being like, hey.
I think some people don't even know they need a fishing.
That's what I mean, So like, I think, if we're talking about our own community, like if the more we talk about like if I'm going this, I'm trying to frame this in the spot burning.
Yeah, I guess
thing. I think that's when you like, the we have some streams around here around Toronto that are clear water, clean, cold brook trout streams still in a city of
nice.
But if it's not, every access point, we have access points now. You can't just really go anywhere. And at each access point is posted. The rules are posted. But,
nice.
So what point am I trying to make? I think, it eventually, rivers get protected because people are on them.
Yeah.
They don't get harmed by people being on them. I don't think so. Like every river that seems to be a secret tends to get taken advantage of until people start paying attention to it.
Yeah, as long as like the masses are doing the right thing on the water, which again comes back to education.
Yeah.
And we're not saying like, I don't know, we've talked about this so many times. We're not saying like, we're going to post on the internet every day, like go to this specific rock pool and fish it now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
no.
There's a difference.
There's
a difference between like, hey, maybe you could fish this river. That's not spot burning.
Yeah, no, not at all. But I guess all that to say is like, I think, inspiring people to get on the river and that story you told about, getting certain regulations banned because, or more education because simply people it's not out there, and it's certainly from an Ontario perspective not put out there by the people that are supposed to be protecting it. So, I think resources like this are great,
And your book's awesome, and like honestly, the fact like to your point, Aldo, like if I was a kid and in the bookstore back in the day when I was like really into fly fishing books, and I saw one about. And I'm in Houston. I saw one about Houston. Like that's. Pretty
if I had this when I was 16, 17, I had my bike and my, like you said, my bike and my 3-weight. And especially in Houston where you don't need waiters. This would be sick. You would just do this every weekend. Like, this is how we...
I love it.
So we grew up, fishing upstate New York. I had a road map book.
Nice. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
for sure.
That's how we found river.
A map.
Yeah.
Like a 4 foot by 4 foot map.
No. It was like a... No, it was literally a book like this, but it was just a road map book. Side note, is this you on the cover? Because it's not Aaron Reed on the cover of the other.
Yeah, that is me. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, now that I'm looking at you, but
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I love it.
That's awesome.
Well, everybody, like we said, the book comes out February 7th.
That's correct,
keep
right?
an eye out for it.
February 7th.
Cool.
Got it.
Okay, good.
You're like, no,
we're just throwing out random dates and hoping that it's right. No.
So by the time this podcast airs, you can go buy it.
You can go buy the book. Okay, we got 5 more questions for you. We ask every guest at the end of every show. And it's called Mitchie's Fishies 5. So it's like, I'm Mitchie. These questions are fishy. There's 5 of them. So here we go. We're going to ask you them now. The first one is, if you had to pick a favorite fish, what would it be? What is your favorite fish and why?
Okay. I knew that you were going to ask me this, but I kind of alluded to the spotted bass already as being like, the native creek-dwelling, super fun fish to catch an ultralight tackle.
Yeah.
That is definitely my favorite. But Danny Scarborough taught me about catching bowfin, and that is probably a close second just because of how much fun it is. You're sight fishing for them in super shallow water. You're not like bombing casts to them. A lot of times it's just like dropping a fly in front of their face, but they're just the bad backwater predator. They're like nothing phases them. I mean, they're
cool looking.
Yeah, they're cool looking. They're really inquisitive. They don't mind like sloshing around and in fact, Danny's talked about intentionally sloshing something in the water because he read that they actually respond to that, and he's done that and got them to come out of weed beds.
Wow.
Yeah, to go see what
because they're curious.
Yeah, they're curious and they know nothing's gonna touch them because they're so mean.
Yeah.
So that
kind of sounds like bowfin might be your favorite, though. You said it's number 2, but
it's a toss up. It's a toss up because I'm not. I love bowfin, but I'm not that good at catching them. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay, I can dig it.
Sorry for picking 2, Mitch, but
no, that's
okay. Bowfin's cool to hear about as a favorite fish because we've never heard that before. I don't think that's pretty cool. And of course, spotted bass, right? Is what you're saying is number 1. I love the spotted bass. Okay, number 2 is if you could go anywhere in the entire world right now to fish, and it's going to be the best time to go, where would you go and why?
Oh man,
anywhere in the world.
Yeah. I think I would go to South America and and fish, Dorado, peacock bass, something like that. Just I've just developed a love for warm water fishing and just stripping
streamers.
Great.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Just since,
I love it.
Yeah.
I love bass fishing.
Warm water's cool.
Yeah.
It's like a different
and
thing.
Just the act of retrieve. It's like you don't get bored. You just want to throw big streamers
active,
and strip them through the water.
Dorado, man. Dorado would be so cool.
Wild.
Yeah.
It comes up all the time on the show too because everybody's just like, I want to catch friggin' Dorado.
Yeah, you look at the water that they're in and they're like, oh man.
Oh, I know. It's clean water and they're just so gold and cool looking.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, number 3 is, what is one of your best fishing memories of all time?
I would say, kind of recently. This is just one that sticks in my memory because of like how much fun it was, and it was kind of like that type A fun, where it's a little rough at the going, but then by the time you're done with it, you're like, man, I wouldn't have changed a thing. We recently went up to Eastern Oklahoma. This was last year. We went up to Eastern Oklahoma and we were fishing the Ouachita National Forest, which people, when they hear Ouachita National Forest, they generally think Arkansas, but there's a part of it that extends over into Eastern Oklahoma. And there's the Ouachita Mountains actually come over into eastern Oklahoma too. And it's not a very populated area, and the rivers are pretty wild up there. Like there's whitewater, sections of whitewater up there that aren't that well known, but it's like, class 4 whitewater up there.
Wow.
And so we put in on one of the rivers up there, and we did a 2-day float, I guess, up there. And it was smallmouth bass, is what we were going for. But, there were largemouth. We caught largemouth, spotted bass, bunch of panfish as well. That was super fun, but it was really hard going. We split it into 2 days. Some sections, there was just so many rocks in the water that we were just like portaging, 100 yards or whatever, just moving our boats, just getting on a boulder, picking them up, putting them on the other side of the boulder, and just leapfrogging. Like whole rock gardens, and then you get into a pool, and you'll be able to paddle this pool, and there'll be like tons of smallmouth in it, and like the water was clear, and you could see these green sunfish in the weed beds down below, and it was just, it was recently, that was just one of those trips I'm like, man, I would love to go back and explore more of eastern Oklahoma. It's a cool,
that sounds
cool
super
fishery.
I've never heard about Oklahoma.
First
And
time
actually, recently, I wrote an article for it, and it's on Hatch now. But it was right when we got back from that trip, there was a scientific paper that got published all about the black bass species in North America. And one of the things that they mentioned was that whole corridor, western Arkansas, eastern Oklahoma, the smallmouth that live there might not actually be like the northern smallmouth that we think about whenever we think of smallies.
Oh.
They are kind of like in the same idea that like a red-eye bass, in a certain waterway, that red-eye bass, the genetics are secluded in that waterway and it becomes its own species. They're
interesting.
Yeah, they did genetic testing on all these rivers up there, and they basically found out the same thing, that these smallmouth aren't exactly smallmouth. They're
like a unique type of bass.
Yeah, they're in fact, that's what the
Oklahoma
authors say
bass.
too, Mitch. They say that like these shouldn't even be, like, the name smallmouth shouldn't even be in these at all. That's their own unique species. I mean, they look like a smallmouth.
Cool.
They got the mottled effect on them, and they're doing smallmouth things. They fight like smallmouth, but they're saying they're genetically unique.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Dang, Oklahoma.
Yeah, and western Arkansas.
Who would have thunk? Yeah, that's cool. I dig it. Okay, very cool memory. It sounds like a nice. I mean, that's just like sounds like one of those days you think about all year, just stoked to do it again.
For sure.
Number 4, Mitch's Fishes Vibe, is why do you fly fish? What do you get out of it? Why do you go out?
I get out probably what a lot of people say, just that whole, like, you just forget everything. You're just out walking a creek, casting a fly rod that takes concentration, and you just kind of. You forget about work, you forget about all those things while you're out on the creek, and it's just super relaxing. Just resets you mentally, physically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like being a kid again.
Yeah, exactly.
You get a little field day. Just go look at frogs, and catch bass, and awesome.
Yeah, and like so many fishing, quote unquote fishing trips, just develop into this like foray into ecology, or
totally
looking for reptiles, amphibians, turning logs over or whatever, looking at what's underneath. So just you never know what's going to happen, but all that is happening is what's in that moment right there, and you just kind of live in that moment for that short time period.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I dig it. Okay, number 5, the final Mitch's Fishies 5 is, what fly pattern represents you best and why? If you were a fly, what would you be?
Oh man. I would say, I'd say a clouser, because it's easy to tie, and there you go. It's simple. I'm simple. You can fish it in all kinds of different scenarios. You can, dead drift it. You can do whatever. So it's kind of like you can fish it up in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, and, love the water up there, to you can fish it down here, to, you can fish it anywhere. I'm sure that my dream place in South America to fish for peacock bass, all those guys are going to eat clousers. It's just
for sure.
And then the other thing too is like I'm just a regular guy, so I feel like you could whip up a dozen clousers in a night, and that's I kind of feel like the same way about me too. I'm just like any other guy that you guys like. I'm just like talking about fishing. I just like being outside. It's like we're all fly fishermen are like that. They're just kind of like same dude.
I like it, clouser. That's great. I dig it. I mean, studied geology. You've written some books. You're fly fishing bowfin. You're a pretty interesting fella, Rob. Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh man, thanks guys. Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's fun. This is shameless plug time. So, where can people find the book or your first book? Where can people find your articles? Of course, we'll post this all in the show notes when the show goes live.
Do you have Instagram? Anybody want if you want people to follow along?
Yeah, sure.
Any of that stuff?
Yeah, so Fly Fishing the Sam at Fly Fishing the Sam is my Instagram page that I started when I wrote my first book, Fly Fishing the Sam. You can get that on flyfishingthesam.com, or you can buy it on Amazon too. Either way, and then Fly Fishing Houston and Southeastern Texas, like you guys said, that comes out February 7th. You can buy that online as well. Any major book retailer is carrying it. And we're going to be having it at local fly shops here soon, hopefully. And also, I'll be traveling around doing a couple little like tie-in things and book signings in the near future. So you can just watch out for that. You can see that on Instagram and meet me there. And I'd love to talk shop with people. So
that's great.
Come on by.
Awesome, wicked. And of course, we'll post like links to stuff in the show notes. But Rob, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, guys. Well, thank you. It's been a blast. It's good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for sending us the book. Yeah,
you got it.
100%.
We've got some serious work to do, Mitchie, in Texas.
Next time you guys come down, if you make that connection in Houston, let me know. That would be fun. Yeah.
Or we just do.
That'd be really cool.
We've got Austin and Houston to visit. We just rent an RV and fish all the waters in between.
Yeah, there you go.
I love it. All right, Rob, thanks so much, man.
Okay, guys. Thank you.